The western sun hung heavy over Copper Creek, spilling down waves of heat like open flame. At 32, Zeke Carter's name was known across the territory. His gift with horses was near legend. Folks said the man could break a wild Mustang with nothing more than steady eyes and a sure hand on the reins. Yet that same stubborn gaze was too often found over a poker table, where whiskey and pride blurred good sense. That evening, Zeke sat beneath the flicker of oil lamps, facing Barnaby Cole, the kind of man Copper Creek both feared and respected. Owner of Raven Bluff Ranch, Cole was rich, cunning, and always wore a smile that barely masked the cold calculation in his eyes. The pile of silver stacked before him gleamed like a trap. Sweat dampened the back of Zeke's neck. Some from the heat, more from knowing his savings, months of hard labor, were slipping away. Pride pinned him to the chair. Walking away meant defeat, and for Zeke Carter, losing was easier to swallow than being branded a coward. Cole drummed his fingers on the table, voice smooth and mocking. "Mr. Carter, looks like your purse is thinning out. Perhaps we change the stakes, make this hand worth the telling?" The room stirred, whispers rolling like wind through grass. Everyone knew Cole liked to twist a game until the other man had nowhere left to stand. This time his gaze locked on Zeke, sharp as a knife. "What do you want?" Zeke asked, voice low. Cole leaned back, struck a match, and lit his cigar. He let the smoke curl before speaking. "Money is dull. I'd wager something finer." He paused, savoring the silence as the saloon held its breath. Then, deliberate as a hanging judge, he said, "If you lose, you marry Amara Bell." 1 week, no longer. The saloon erupted. Chairs scraped, glasses clattered, voices rose. All eyes turned toward the small stage where Amara Bell was known to sing and dance. She had come to Copper Creek scarcely 3 months back. Tight curls tied neat, eyes dark as midnight wells, her laughter drawing every head. A black woman alone in a town of prejudice, she was both curiosity and constant talk. At that moment she stood on the staircase leading to the back hall, readying herself for the night's set. Lamplight touched her honey-brown skin, sweat glistening in the heat. When her name rang out, Amara froze, fingers gripping the rail, though she made no move forward. Zeke went still. He had gambled with his own sweat, his horse, even his future. But to stake another's life, marriage to a woman who bore no say in it, was a lash across his face before the whole town. "This isn't a game," Zeke rasped. Cole laughed, sending gray rings drifting toward the rafters. "For me, it's entertainment." Think on it. Copper Creek would dine on this tale for years. A reckless cowboy wedding, the saloon's newest jewel. What could be finer? Laughter rippled. Some clapped along, others shook their heads, pity in their eyes for Zeke. Zeke turned, and for the first time his eyes truly caught Amara's. Amid the smoke, the noise, she shone brighter than the lamps. It wasn't her stage allure that struck him. It was her stare. Stern, proud, reminding him she was no trinket for men to barter. A sharp ache pricked his chest. Not love, not desire, just the sting of shame, deep and raw. For once, the gambler felt the full weight of his recklessness. Cole tilted his head, smile cutting like a blade. "Well, Carter? Do you lack the courage? The famed horsebreaker, backing down from a hand of cards?" The room hushed. Zeke drew a breath, whiskey burning his throat. Pride thundered in his chest. If he stood, the name Carter would be spat with contempt till his dying day. Worse, Cole would claim victory without ever showing his hand. His grip on the cards tightened, knuckles white. Then, slow and steady, Zeke lifted his gaze. His dark blue eyes burned as they locked with Cole's. "Deal the cards," he said. The words landed like iron, hammering shut the lid of fate. The roar from the saloon still carried into the cramped back room. Amara Bell sat before a cracked, wooden-framed mirror, fingers winding a ribbon through her tight curls. The oil lamp threw a glow across her honey-brown skin, slick with sweat, though her eyes held no trace of joy. At 26, she had drifted from town to town, never lingering longer than it took to earn a living, leaving once the whispers and prejudice grew too heavy to bear. Dancing had become the only skill that kept her alive, not for love of it, but because it paid better than washing linens or carrying plates. Her mother had died when Amara was 16, leaving an emptiness that never healed, and the lesson that a black woman in the West had to fight twice as hard just to survive. She had never imagined her name would be tossed onto a gaming table. Yet tonight, with one turn of cards, her life had been turned into a wager by the most powerful man in Copper Creek. The dressing room door swung open, and Barnaby Cole stepped inside. His shadow filled the narrow space, choking the air already thick with heat. He removed his hat, smiling as if this were no more than a polite call. "Miss Bell," he said smoothly, his cold eyes scanning the meager room. "I trust I'm not intruding." Amara rose, spine straight, the hastily tied green dress only sharpening the steel in her stance. "What do you want here?" Her voice was low, guarded. Cole did not answer at once. He set a small cloth bag on the vanity. The jingle of silver coins rang sharp, and for a heartbeat, Amara stilled. He nudged the bag forward, lips curling. $500. Enough for you to leave Copper Creek, start a little shop of your own. A cleaner life than spinning for drunken men. Heat flared in Amara's face. "What do you take me for, Mr. Cole? A horse at auction?" She shoved the bag back toward him, voice firm. "I am not something you can gamble away." Cole showed no surprise. He settled into a chair, lit a cigar, and let smoke coil in the cramped room. "Call it what you will. But you know as well as I do, they've been talking out there. Carter won't walk away. He'll honor the bet. And when he loses, you'll be his wife. Whether you wish it or not." Amara bit her lip. The thought of being forced into marriage as entertainment twisted her chest. Cole's gaze lingered, patient, almost amused, watching every flicker of her face. "500, he pressed, to turn a burden into an opportunity. I heard you once told the barkeep's wife you dreamed of opening a dress shop. Here's money to make it real." Her hands trembled. She hated him for digging into her life, for turning a private dream into a blade pressed against her pride. Yet a part of her wavered. $500, a sum she could never earn in a lifetime of dancing. The room went quiet, broken only by the ticking of an old clock. Memory dragged her backward. She thought of the ramshackle house, outside St. Louis, of her mother's cracked hands scrubbing clothes from dawn to dusk, smiling through weariness. She remembered the white neighbors' sneers when the two of them passed, whispers that folk like them belonged to the gutter. She remembered that last night, her mother coughing blood in her arms, whispering she must live as a human being, not as something trampled underfoot. The ache had never faded. Now, being wagered like a token, the old wound split open again. She longed to be seen, not as a dancer, not as a prize, but as Amara Bell, a woman of dignity. Her gaze flicked to the mirror. Her own eyes stared back, reddened, scraped raw by insult. Then another memory flashed. Just yesterday, when she had performed, a cowboy had stood quietly at the back. No whistles, no leers, no smirk. He had only tipped his hat in a brief nod before leaving. Zeke Carter. That look had not been laced with contempt. It had carried something else. Respect. Fragile, awkward, yet real. And it was that memory, set against Cole's filthy game, that struck a different chord in her chest. Cole ground out his cigar, rose and placed his hat back on his head. Think on it, Miss Bell. Before dawn, I'll want an answer. The money's here. The chance is here. Either you become Carter's wife or you leave. But mark my words, no one crosses Barnaby Cole and finds peace in this town. The door slammed behind him, leaving the room heavy with smoke and humiliation. Amara sank into the chair, covering her face with both hands. Between fury and despair, an ember of longing stirred. $500 could buy her escape. The little dress shop she had pictured on sleepless nights, a place of fabric and color, a home shaped by her own hands. Yet Cole's eyes, and his veiled threats, warned her that either path cost freedom. Her chest tightened. She knew she stood at a crossroads, swallow pride for the sake of survival, or gamble everything to guard her dignity. In the fractured mirror, she saw herself, a woman with eyes that refused to bow. And in their depths flickered another image, the steady gaze of the cowboy who had nodded once, wordless, but with respect. A small flame, fragile as it was, but enough to keep her from breaking. By morning, Copper Creek was swollen with rumor. The fabric seller whispered to his customers. The blacksmith shook his head between hammer strikes. Ranch wives brushing their hair on porches spoke of nothing else. Ezekiel Zeke Carter wagering a marriage against Barnaby Cole had become hotter talk than the summer drought. And the name Amara Bell rolled from tongue to tongue, as though she were no longer a woman, but the punchline of some cruel jest. Zeke pushed through the door of Martha's Cafe, his hat pulled low near to hiding his eyes. He knew the place well. The pancakes were the best in town, but today the food was dust in his mouth. From the moment he sat down, whispers pricked the back of his neck like needles. Is it true? They're to marry? Carter's lost his mind. A black dancer for a wife. What could be worse? Think she'll even agree to it? Zeke gripped his spoon hard, head bent low. He knew he had cornered himself. Pride had forced him to nod at Barnaby Cole. But in daylight, the whole thing looked like a farce laid bare for all to see. A shadow fell across the table. Sheriff Jonas Reed slid into the seat opposite. Tall, lean, with stern eyes that still carried kindness, he set his hat down. You can't keep your head buried, Zeke, he said, quiet but firm. The more you hide, the uglier it gets. Best thing now is to face it. Face Cole. Face the town. Most of all, face her. Zeke rubbed at his forehead, voice heavy. I didn't choose this, Jonas. I just couldn't back down. The sheriff nodded. I know. But she deserves to hear it from you, not from gossip on the street. Zeke's eyes lifted, weighted with regret. He hadn't answered when the cafe door swung open. Light spilled in, and the room fell to silence. Amara Bell stepped inside. She wore a simple green dress, her curls tied back, yet her stride carried such fierce certainty that all talk died on the spot. Folks watched not only out of curiosity, but because her bearing demanded it. She never glanced around. Her dark eyes locked on Zeke and did not waver. Crossing the floor, her heels struck the wooden planks in a steady beat. She stopped before him, voice calm but sharp as steel. We need to talk. Zeke raised his gaze. When their eyes met, sound drained away. In her stare he found no fragility, only strength, born from years of enduring and refusal to be trampled again. In his, Amara saw not arrogance but regret, heavier than pride, the weight of conscience. Sheriff Jonas stood, stepping aside. Martha gave a subtle signal, and though the cafe filled with people, all bent their heads, pretending at their plates, ears tuned to every word. Amara sat, back straight. "Do you know what they're saying out there?" she asked, voice measured, each word cutting clear. "That I am nothing but a wager lost. That my marriage is a saloon joke," Zeke swallowed, fingers tight around his coffee. "I never meant for it to be this way." Never meant? A thin laugh, bitter, left her lips, though her eyes shone with anger. "You could have walked away. You could have said no. Instead, you chose pride over my name." Zeke drew a long breath, then set the cup down hard. "You're right. I chose pride, but I did not choose to shame you. Cole laid a trap, and I stepped right in. That night, I thought only of not being branded a coward. I didn't think of you. That was my fault." Amara sat silent. For a moment, only the scrape of a spoon elsewhere broke the hush, then stilled again. At last she leaned closer, eyes boring into him. "Do you know what it is to live your whole life under scorn, Carter? I've carried it since I was a child. And now, with one hand of cards, you've made it the laugh of the town. Tell me, what do you think I have left to lose?" Zeke lifted his head, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I know," he said softly, "and I know I was wrong. But I swear, if you'll allow it, I'll see to it no one looks down on you again. Even if it costs me the Carter name." Silence pressed in, heavy as stone. Amara leaned back, breathing deep as if to hold down the storm within. "You can say that now," she murmured, voice quiet but sharp. "But I'll believe it when I see it." Zeke nodded, eyes steady. "Then I'll show it. Not for Cole. Not for this town. For you." Their eyes locked again, neither yielding. Between them stretched a thread, thin but unbroken, tense yet real. Amara rose, reclaiming her armor of poise. "There's more to speak of, Carter. But not here. This town doesn't need another show." She turned, walking out into the blaze of Copper Creek's sun. Zeke sat motionless, watching her vanish into the dust. For the first time in years, he felt a road before him, not carved by pride, but lit by the fire in a woman's eyes. Sheriff Jonas returned, hand firm on his shoulder. "You see, Zeke? Not every fight's on the poker table. Some require the heart." Zeke gave no reply. He only stared after Amara's fading figure, the promise he had uttered echoing inside him. She would not be made small again. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, yet for Amara Bell, each hour dragged like a sentence hanging above her head. News of the wedding spread faster than prairie wind across Copper Creek. Folks gathered in the saloon, at the smithy, in the mercantile. Some sneered, some whispered pity. Others leaned in with giddy curiosity, eager to watch Barnaby Cole's cruel entertainment reach its end. That morning, the sky above Copper Creek was sharp and clear. The judge's office, a squat whitewashed building with square windows, was rarely busy, but now it brimmed with bodies. Horses tied along the hitching rail, boots clattering on the dusty boards, chatter rising like a carnival. Yet beneath the noise lingered the stench of scandal. Barnaby Cole arrived early. He wore a black velvet coat, crisp white shirt, tie knotted neat. His smile stretched long, the grin of a wolf waiting for the trap to spring. He shook hands, clapped shoulders, and cast glances toward the door, savoring the play he himself had staged. Then Amara appeared. She wore no white gown. None had been set aside for her. Instead, She had pressed her simple green dress until it lay smooth against her frame. The waist cinched tight, the hem swayed with the dignity of her stride. Her curls had been brushed, her face bare of paint or jewels. Only her eyes, dark and blazing, carried fire enough for the morning sun. She stepped inside with her head high, as if to remind the town she was no object to be bartered. Murmurs rippled. Some women turned away with curled lips. A few men whistled. Yet among the stares were others, hesitant, almost startled, drawn by the unshaken pride in her bearing. At the front, Zeke Carter waited beside the oak table where the judge shuffled papers. His clothes were plain, white shirt frayed at the collar, black trousers, boots worn thin. But when Amara entered, his eyes shifted. His hand tightened on the brim of his hat, breath drawn deep, steadying himself against the tremor inside. When the judge called their names, Amara's footsteps echoed in the room. The crowd hushed. Zeke watched her approach, and for the first time he saw it. Strength, not submission. She was no girl being forced forward, but a woman choosing to stand tall on ground rough with stone. The ceremony moved quickly. The old judge, hair gone silver, read the words as he had 100 times before. There were no flowers, no music, no blessings shouted in joy. Only the soft hiss of whispers beneath and the scratch of pen on parchment. When it came to the ring, Zeke fumbled at his pocket, pulling free a plain silver band. His hand shook, not with fear, but with the weight of what he had done, of what this moment demanded. Amara extended her hand. Her brown skin met the rough calluses of his palm. When the ring slid onto her finger, their eyes caught, and Zeke allowed the whole town to see that his gaze held not shame, but resolve. Ezekiel Carter, the judge intoned, and Amara, Bell, by law, and before the eyes of Copper Creek, you are now husband and wife. The room stilled. Tradition waited for the final gesture. Zeke turned to her. Amara's face was calm, though her eyes flickered. He hesitated. He did not know if he had any right to touch her, not when choice had been stripped from them both. At last, he bent slowly and pressed his lips to her cheek. It was no claim, no boast, only an awkward apology, a vow left unspoken. Amara stiffened. Heat rushed her face, not from shame before the town, but from the startling sincerity in that small, hesitant touch. Deep inside, something faint stirred, a current, fragile yet undeniable. Outside, Barnaby Cole stood with arms crossed, smile fixed in triumph. Yet for those who watched close, in the instant Amara did not turn away, Cole's grin faltered. For he saw what he could not own, the meeting of two eyes that belonged to no card he ever dealt. The crowd filed out, carrying new rumors. Some scoffed, some gaped, some whispered that Carter's eyes looked different today. On the wooden steps, Amara stepped into the morning breeze. Her green dress fluttered as she whispered inwardly. The game might have begun in chains, but its end would be hers to decide. Zeke walked beside her, leaving space enough, saying nothing. Yet now and then his glance slid toward her, as if to be certain she was still there, still walking proud at his side. On his worn face, the faintest curl of a smile appeared, and in Zeke's heart, for the first time in years, something stirred. Not the thrill of victory, but the stirring of another battle, one he had no wish to lose. The road out of Copper Creek stretched long in the evening sun, dust rising behind the Mustang's hooves. Zeke rode in front, Amara seated behind, her hands gripping the saddle, yet keeping her body as far from him as she could. Neither spoke. Only the wind whistled, and the steady beat of hooves echoed across the dry land. An hour later, they reached his cabin. It stood apart on the edge of a field of wild grass, backed by a low hill. The timber walls had weathered dark with years of storm and sun, yet a thin smoke curling from the chimney showed there was warmth within. A few horses were tied near the fence, their neighing familiar as they greeted their master. Amara slid down, lifting her gaze. She had slept in many places before. Damp rented rooms, cheap inns, corners borrowed from strangers. But never had she stood before what now, by law, was called her husband's home. The word alone struck something inside her, pulling tight in her chest. Zeke dismounted, stripped the saddle, and led the Mustang toward the small stable. He said nothing as he returned and opened the door. Amara followed, her hand brushing the rough wood. Just as she pushed, a broad hand touched over hers, fleeting but firm, guiding the door open. Zeke's fingers brushed against her skin in passing, heat flashing between them before he stepped aside. His eyes softened for a moment, then darted away as though ashamed to have let anything show. Inside, the cabin was tidier than she had imagined. The floorboards swept clean, the table and chairs rough-hewn but sturdy. In the corner, a short shelf sagged under worn books. Beside it leaned a guitar, a skin of dust across its frame. Against the far wall stood a single bed, blanket folded square. Amara moved slowly about the room, her fingers grazing the chair back. She paused at the shelf, pulled down a book, and turned a few pages. It was a collection of poems. The discovery stirred something in her. A cowboy's house, yet words of verse tucked away in the corner. Zeke caught her glance and scratched his neck. Those belong to my mother. I kept them, that's all. His voice was low, gruff, almost embarrassed. She closed the book and set it back. Her eyes softened, a trace of surprise shaping her thoughts. Perhaps he was not the blunt, careless man she had expected. That evening they sat at the small table. Zeke warmed a pot of stew, the smell of beef and potatoes filling the room. Amara ate little, yet her face betrayed surprise that he could cook at all. Didn't expect a cowboy to keep a kitchen this neat, she muttered. Zeke shrugged, a flicker of amusement in his eyes, but he gave no answer. They ate in silence. Afterward, he set his bowl aside and fixed his gaze on her. We need this plane between us. 6 months, that's all. After that, if you want to go, I won't stop you. If you want the money Cole set aside, I won't stand in the way. We only need the town to believe this marriage is real. Amara tapped her fingers on the wood, weighing his words. 6 months. Short, yet uncertain. She looked at him, finding honesty there, without shadow or mockery. Fine, she said at last. 6 months, but I've my own condition. In that time, you won't treat me as a joke. I've my dignity, whatever this town may say. Zeke inclined his head, slow and solemn. I promise. They held each other's eyes longer than either meant to. Amara saw no scorn in his dark blue gaze, only a glimmer, faint but steady, of something else. Night fell. Amara stood at the window, staring out at the moonlit field. The cabin lay still, crickets singing their steady song. Zeke had taken the long settee, leaving the bed for her. His back turned, yet now and then his eyes strayed toward her silhouette by the glass. In that quiet, they both felt the space between them, the gulf of color, of pasts, of pride. Yet under it all ran a thread, slight and unseen, like water stirring beneath dry ground. Amara touched the window frame, recalling the moment his hand brushed hers at the cabin door. Brief, unthinking, yet enough to quicken her pulse. She shook her head at her own foolishness, Yet in her eyes a small fire lingered, curiosity, and something not yet named. Zeke closed his eyes, telling himself 6 months would bring an end to it. Still, his mind would not quiet. The image of her in that green dress, standing proud in the cabin's center, her gaze unbroken, stayed with him, sharp and unshakable. The night wind carried the stench of smoke, still clinging to the air. Behind them, the barn was nothing but charred beams, its frame a skeleton left bare. Neighbors had gone home after helping beat down the blaze. Now only 2 remained, Zeke and Amara, sitting in the cabin, a small fire in the hearth casting gold across the timber walls. Zeke leaned back in his chair, eyes bloodshot with weariness, yet unwilling to close. Amara set a pot of water to boil, searching for a clean cloth. When she knelt to tend the burn on his wrist, he tried to brush her off, muttering it was nothing but a scrape. But when her hand touched his skin, he fell silent. Her fingers moved deftly, light as feathers. She draped a woolen shawl across his shoulders, then dipped a rag into the cool water and pressed it to the raw patch of skin. In that moment, their eyes met. Zeke had never lingered long in a woman's gaze, too proud, too guarded, and never finding reason to stay. But now his stare held, resting on the face beside him, her cheeks bronzed by firelight. "You didn't have to do that," Amara murmured, her voice hoarse after the long day. "Facing Cole and his men alone, you could have lost more than a barn." Zeke gave a short laugh, though it faded quick. "I couldn't back down. He wants this land. I won't give it, not out of pride, but because it's all I have." Amara's hands stilled. Silence dropped between them, filled only by the crack of firewood. She studied him, the man the town called reckless and arrogant. Yet here he spoke with a steadiness that trembled at its edges. "Zeke." Her voice softened, his name spoken gentle for the first time. "I've spent my life treated like an ornament, something to be looked at, dismissed. But tonight, when the flames rose and you stood in front of me, I saw something else. A man who didn't run, who didn't sell another out to save himself." He tilted his head, startled by her words. His mouth worked before the sound came. "I admire you, Amara. The way you never bow to Cole. The way you stare down every sneer. His hand tightened on the edge of the shawl. "I wish I had half your courage." The firelight flickered in their eyes. Amara felt her heartbeat quicken, not at the compliment, but at the rare honesty in his voice. Without thought, she laid her hand over his, rough skin meeting smooth. He did not pull away. He said nothing. He only looked, letting the silence speak. Outside, the night wind moaned through the cabin eaves. Inside, 2 souls once forced into a marriage for sport, now sat in a hush that felt like shelter. Slowly, Amara withdrew, rising to pour hot water into a cup. Her back turned, but her lips trembled. Zeke sat still, watching as though afraid the moment might vanish if he moved. They said little else that night. Yet when Amara laid a blanket across him before retreating to her room, his hand lingered on the edge, warm with her touch. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, the weight he carried eased, as though someone had lifted it with him. After the night the barn burned, Zeke was nearly spent. The burns along his arm and the scrape across his shoulder made every movement a trial. But as always, he tried to hide the pain, forcing himself to tend the horses and the blackened stretch of land. Amara would not allow it. She pressed him back into a chair inside the cabin, took up a basin of warm water, and set out the clean cloths and herbs the ranch wives had sent. That morning the sunlight slanted through the window, laying gold across his face. Amara sat close, her hands gentle as she cleaned each wound. Warm water trickled down his skin. Zeke flinched, but made no sound. He only watched her, the dark eyes fixed in concentration, the lips pressed tight to mask her worry. All day she hovered near. She boiled broth, urged him to eat. She helped him change his shirt when lifting his arm sent pain shooting through him. Each time her fingers brushed his skin, the air between them thickened. Zeke turned his face aside, but his heart thudded like a boy's, unsteady, unbidden. By evening she brought a blanket, spreading it over the long chair where he lay. "Stop being stubborn," she said softly, voice edged with both scolding and care. "If you collapse, who'll keep this place standing?" Zeke gave a weary smile. "You will." Her head lifted, startled by the simple words. In his gray-blue eyes she saw no jest, but trust. Trust placed in her, the woman the town had laughed at. That night, the fire glowed red. Zeke leaned back, Amara sitting across, the wool shawl still draped across his shoulders. The cabin was hushed but for the crack of kindling. Zeke spoke first, his voice low, stripped bare. "Amara, this marriage began as a false thing. 6 months, then gone. But He drew a long breath. "I don't want it to end that way anymore. If you'll let me, I want to stay with you. Not half a year, but all my years." Amara sat still, her heart pounding. The words held no flourish, yet they struck like hooves pounding the open prairie, direct, powerful, undeniable. The walls she had built for years trembled. She lifted her gaze, their eyes locked, unflinching. His hand reached for hers, threading their fingers together. Not rushed, not demanding. Quiet, certain. Warmth spread through her. From the steady look, to the joined hands, to the breath that mingled closer. Zeke bent and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was not fierce, but trembling, hesitant, as though both feared shattering the fragile moment. Then Amara closed her eyes, her hand rising to his shoulder, and the hesitation burned away. Zeke drew her nearer, his breath and hers entwining. What began unsteady grew sure, deep, as if they had been waiting all their lives. Her fingers slipped through his tangled hair. His rough palm found hers, then traced the curve of her shoulder, as though to etch every warmth into memory. Their bodies pressed close, heartbeats hammering against each other. The fire flared, casting light over Amara's bronze skin. Zeke could not look away. Every movement was real, stripped of fear, stripped of pretense. Just two souls scarred by life, daring at last to be touched at their rawest place. That night, the small cabin filled with their breath, with touches both tender and desperate. They came together not for duty, not for Cole's cruel wager, but for their own hearts. At last, a beginning. When dawn slipped through the cracks, Amara lay in Zeke's arms, her ear against the steady thrum of his heart. She smiled, knowing the false marriage had turned real. What once felt like a sentence had become the gentlest gift. Her heart now belonged to the man beside her. Rumor in Copper Creek always moved fast as fire on dry grass, but this time it roared fiercer than any storm that had ever blown through town. Barnaby Cole was the hand behind it. From his fine office on Main Street, he sipped whiskey and let venom drip into every saloon, smithy, and mercantile. "Carter's marriage is nothing but a show," he told anyone willing to listen. "In 6 months, the girl will be gone, and the land will be back where it belongs." He went further, hiring a lawyer out of Helena to threaten a petition in county court, claiming Zeke had forged a false marriage to hold on to his property. To Cole, Every dirty trick was fair play so long as it fed his hunger. Soon, the whole town found new sport: wagering. In the saloon, men laid bets on whether Carter would cast off his wife first or she'd leave him. Some laughed outright. Others feigned pity. But nearly all agreed. This marriage could not last. Amara heard the whispers at the market. Passing the vegetable stall, she caught women murmuring, their eyes cutting sideways. That girl. Everyone knows she used to dance in saloons. Carter can't be serious. Just a passing fancy. Her jaw tightened, hands gripping the basket until her knuckles whitened. Yet that was not the cruelest blow. That evening, on her way home, she stopped at the saloon to buy bread. Passing the back room, she froze at Cole's voice, pitched loud enough to spill through the door. Do you folks know who Amara Bell really is? She's wandered from town to town, dancing for pennies. Mother dead, no father. Her whole life nothing but swaying hips on a stage. And now she thinks she'll be mistress of land? That comedy's better than any show on the playhouse boards. Laughter erupted. Mugs clanged together. Amara stood still. Each word struck like stone. She thought herself hardened to contempt, to the narrowed eyes of strangers. But hearing Cole drag her past into the light, turned into a scar for the whole town to jeer at. Her chest ached sharper than any wound. She slipped away, steps heavy as iron. By the time she reached the cabin, she sank onto the porch steps, the last of her pride trembling. Tears came silent, no sobs, just hot trails carving down her cheeks. Zeke returned late from mending the northern fence. He saw her in the red wash of sunset, shoulders faintly shaking. In that instant, he needed no words to know. He had heard the breed of rumor Cole spread, and knew how sharp it cut. He climbed the steps, boots creaking on the boards. He said nothing, only sat beside her. For a while they listened to the hush of wind, stirring her dress hem. Then Zeke's hand rose, resting on her shoulder. Not gripping, not pulling, just the steady warmth of it, solid as earth. Amara turned, met his gaze. In it she found no pity, what she dreaded most, but quiet presence, unshaken, as rooted as an oak in the field. She drew a breath, ragged but sure. The shame of her past lingered, yet that hand told her she needn't face it alone. Zeke gave a slight nod, then looked back toward the horizon. He offered no vow, no bold declaration. The hand itself was enough. That night, as Amara lit the lamp inside, the muffled gossip still rose outside. But the fire in her chest no longer burned alone. She knew Zeke stood with her, unwilling to let Cole turn her into a jest. And in the hush between them, beneath the storm of rumors, the bond between them pulled tighter, unseen yet unbreakable. The day of trial dawned, and Copper Creek stirred as though for a festival. The small county courtroom, usually reserved for quarrels over fence lines, unpaid flour, or saloon brawls, was packed to the rafters. People crowded the porch outside. Others lined the hallway just to catch a whisper. Everyone knew this was not simply a case of land. It was a contest of honor between Barnaby Cole and Ezekiel Carter. Cole entered first, dressed in black velvet, silver-topped cane in hand, a lawyer from Helena trailing behind. His eyes swept the room, cold as steel, lingering on Amara before his mouth curved into a smirk. Across the aisle, Zeke and Amara sat plainly dressed. Zeke wore a white shirt frayed at the collar, a brown coat, no tie. Amara chose the same deep green dress she had worn on their wedding day. Her curls were tied neat, her gaze steady, though her heart trembled. When the gavel fell, Cole's lawyer rose. His words rang sharp, rehearsed. "Your Honor, We bring proof that the union of Carter and Amara Bell is a sham, a wager, a contrivance to keep land, not a union of true intent. By law, such a marriage is void, and Carter unfit to hold his claim. Murmurs swelled. Cole reclined, lips twisted in satisfaction. The lawyer summoned witnesses, Cole's own men, who swore they had heard Zeke admit the marriage was struck to shield his property. Amara's hands turned cold. Each charge cut her raw. She could not deny part of it was true. They had begun with a hand of cards. But her heart knew the truth had changed since then. When his turn came, Zeke rose. His voice was rough, yet firm. Yes, it began with a wager. I was a fool, and I placed the bet. But every soul here knows a hand of cards cannot rebuild a barn, cannot spend sleepless nights saving the Hamiltons' farm, cannot win the respect Amara has earned from you. He turned, eyes locked on Cole. If this is called false, then everything we've done together since that day is false too. And you know better than that, then. Amara stood. Her chest hammered, her voice shaky at first, but growing steady. I am Amara Bell. I once danced to survive, and I do not shame from it. My past may not shine, but since the day I entered that cabin, I have lived true. I've tended this land, stood beside this man, not for money, but because I chose to. If I must stand before this town and say it plain, then hear me. This is no sham. This is my family. Her knees weakened beneath her. The room buzzed with whispers, eyes fixed upon her. She nearly faltered back into her chair. Zeke saw. Without a word he reached, clasping her hand in his, plain for all to see. His grip was broad, warm, unshakable. Amara lifted her head, meeting the calm pride in his gaze, and knew she was not alone. That single clasp rang louder than any testimony. Then the turn no one expected. Old Mr. Hamilton and his wife, frail with years, hobbled forward with their canes. His voice rasped, yet carried. Folks say Carter and his wife pretend. But without them, my land would be Cole's today. They gave us money, they saved us. I ask you, who pretends at sacrifice? Noise rippled. Others rose. Neighbors telling of Amara teaching their children to sew, of Zeke mending fences without asking coin. One by one, voices added, until the crowded room became a chorus. The judge hammered his gavel. Silence fell. The old man's eyes swept the crowd, stern but softened. This court rules not by rumor, but by evidence. And today's evidence shows the marriage of Ezekiel Carter and Amara Bell is lawful and bound within the life of this community. The petition of Mr. Cole is denied. A wave rolled through the room. Cole's face blanched, his lips trembled. He could do nothing but tighten his grip on the silver cane. Zeke exhaled, turning to Amara. She still shook, yet her eyes shone bright with tears. He squeezed her hand again, this time not just comfort, but a vow unspoken. Before all, he would never let go. When they stepped into the sunlight, the air blazed golden. Townsfolk lined the street, some nodding, some smiling for the first time. Amara bowed her head lightly, Zeke standing tall, his hand clasped in hers. For the first time, they walked not under the shadow of a wager, but as husband and wife in truth, side by side, standing firm in Copper Creek. Barnaby Cole had lost hard in court, but he was not the sort to bow out in defeat. With his name bruised before the town, he retreated to his sprawling ranch, brooding in a dark-paneled room, face shadowed with rage. If he could not crush Zeke with law, he would with cunning. And this time, his scheme struck at the heart of every rancher's survival. Water. The northern stream flowed first through Hamilton land, then curved down across Carter's Range. If Cole could block it, the coming dry months would parch Zeke's pasture, starve the horses, and leave his land worthless. He hired men to dig a covert channel and raise a timber dam across the creek. Word reached Zeke swiftly, not from spies, but from the very people he and Amara had helped. Old Mr. Hamilton, hat trembling in his grip, hurried to warn him. "Carter, Cole's cut the stream. If we don't act, your pasture will crack to dust in weeks." Zeke clenched his jaw. Alone, he couldn't fight it. But this time, the town stood with him. "We can't let him win," another rancher said. "If Carter's land goes dry, the rest of us aren't far behind. We'll dig a new channel, take the water around the hill." Amara listened, heart pounding. This town had once mocked her, dismissed her as a dancer. Now they offered their hands for her and Zeke's sake. She knew this was her moment to prove she belonged. At dawn, the work began. Under the blaze of sun, men and women, even children, joined in. Shovels bit the earth, picks split stone, buckets of water were hauled. Sweat darkened shirts, mud smeared skirts, yet no one faltered. Amara tied her dress high, knotted her blouse tight, bare feet sinking in the muck. She bent and lifted each heavy spade of soil, arms trembling yet steady. Sweat streamed down her temples, her curls sticking damp to her brow. Zeke worked beside her, muscles straining as his shovel rose and fell. When he glanced up, he found Amara looking back. Dust and sweat marked them both, yet their eyes met in the heat of labor. A smile flickered, wordless, brief, the smile of comrades who had walked through fire together. From a ridge, Cole watched, fury burning hotter with every stroke of their tools. He had thought Copper Creek followed strength, but his own arrogance had driven them into Carter's camp. Every shovel of dirt struck like a verdict against him. Days passed, and the trench stretched farther, deeper. Then at last, the water broke through, spilling into the new channel, tumbling down the slope. Clear, cold, alive. It rushed onto Carter's pasture, soaking the earth, feeding the grass. The people cheered, clapping, laughing, their voices echoing off the hills. Amara stood on the bank, mud caking her legs, hair damp with sweat. Her eyes gleamed as bright as the flowing water. Zeke came to her side, lifted a hand to wipe a bead of sweat from her cheek. She laughed softly, color rising to her face, and turned aside to hide the swell of feeling. No words were needed. They both knew. This channel had saved more than land. It had carved out trust, rooted love, and bound them to a community that now claimed them as its own. That night, Copper Creek rang like a festival. Bread, roasted meat, jugs of corn whiskey were passed from hand to hand. A banjo twanged, children darted around the fire, sparks flying high into the sky. Amara sat with dirt still under her nails, yet her heart lighter than it had been in years. Zeke sat close, quiet as ever, but when the firelight caught his eyes, he turned to her. For one breath, the world hushed, and she saw it clear. What began as a wager had become the truest thing of her life. By September, Copper Creek had slipped into a gentle autumn. Maples around the town square blazed gold, their leaves drifting on the breeze. Folks busied themselves raising a stage, stringing bunting, hanging paper lanterns in preparation for Founder's Day, the celebration of the town's birth, and one of the rare times neighbors set aside quarrels to come together. This year, anticipation burned brighter than usual. There would be a dance, and everyone wanted to see with their own eyes if Ezekiel Zeke Carter and Amara Bell were truly man and wife. The court had quieted rumors of a false marriage, but curiosity still smoldered in Copper Creek. By dusk, lanterns lit the square in golden glow. Long tables groaned under cornbread, roast pork, and jugs of whiskey. Fiddles and banjos struck up lively reels, drawing couples into circles of spinning feet. From the Hamiltons' small house, Amara stepped into the night. She wore a long green dress, hem brushing the ground, its seams carefully mended by her own hand. Simple though it was, the lamplight made the fabric shimmer finer than silk. Her dark curls were pinned high, a few loose tendrils swaying with each step. As she crossed the square, heads turned, whispers faded. Zeke stood waiting at the edge of the crowd. His shirt was white, his brown coat pressed, hair combed wet, though his boots remained dusty as always. He looked uneasy, hat twisting between his fingers. He had never taken to parties, and dancing least of all. Amara approached, eyes glinting with amusement. "You look as though you're marching into battle." Zeke cleared his throat, jaw tight. "I'm no good at this." She extended her hand, slim and warm beneath the lantern light. "Then let me lead." The music swelled, and they stepped into the ring of dancers. At first Zeke moved stiffly, his feet clumsy, grip uncertain, gaze darting like a man seeking escape. But Amara's voice was soft at his ear, steadying the rhythm. "Left, right, now turn, slowly." When he dared meet her eyes, he saw confidence sparkling there. It steadied him. His steps grew sure, his hand firm. As he spun her, Amara laughed lightly, green skirts flaring like a bright flame. For a heartbeat, the square itself seemed to pause. Gradually, the other couples drew back, leaving space for the two of them. The music clattered joyfully on, yet Zeke heard only the rush of his own heart. A rare smile broke across his face, unguarded, honest. He bent his head close, voice low and rough. "I never thought I'd see a night like this." Amara's breath brushed his lips. "Nor did I. But now I don't ever want to lose it." They halted mid-dance. Under the lantern glow, Zeke leaned down, Amara tilted up. The kiss came, gentle at first, then deeper, certain. Not duty, not proof for the town, a declaration. They belonged to each other. The square erupted, cheers, whistles, applause. Women clapped, children shrieked in delight. But for Zeke and Amara, there was only the thunder of their own hearts. At the fringe of the square, Barnaby Cole stood frozen. His silver-topped cane quivered in his grip, eyes burning with rage. He had wagered the town would see sham, would laugh. Instead, the kiss before him shattered the last of his hold. Without a word, he turned and stalked into the shadows, his figure shrinking like a broken ghost retreating from the light. For many watching, that moment marked the fall of Copper Creek's old tyrant. The music played on, lanterns blazed overhead. In the circle of townsfolk, Amara and Zeke remained pressed close, yet within their hearts it was quiet. Only the two of them. When Amara lowered her brow to rest against his shoulder, Zeke knew. Their love was no longer whispered in darkness, no longer guarded behind walls. It had stepped fully into the light, undeniable, fierce, and true. That winter came slow, snow falling later than usual, but in Copper Creek the air shifted faster than any wind sweeping down from the western range. After Founder's Day, no one whispered of false vows or the wager that had bound two strangers. Folks spoke of the Carters as proof that some things born wrong could still bloom in places no one expected. Barnaby Cole, once perched high, sank in the very mire he'd stirred. After his courtroom defeat, talk of shady dealings spread like wildfire. A man from Helena arrived with a thick file of bribes and crooked land seizures. The news burned through town, Fear of Cole vanished, and anger long buried rose up. Families he had robbed of fields stepped forward to testify. In the end, the authorities stripped him of his ranch. Part returned to those he wronged. The rest sold off to pay the debts he had hidden. On the day Cole left Copper Creek, clouds hung low and gray. He walked alone. No lackeys followed. No townsfolk waved him off. His silver cane struck hard against the road, each step a hollow echo. People watched, but not a soul felt pity. A kingdom built on lies had crumbled, and for the first time in years, Copper Creek breathed free. Meanwhile, Zeke and Amara's place grew into a new center of life. The barn stood rebuilt, water from the fresh-cut channel fed the fields, and horses thundered strong across the pasture. Yet the land was no longer just theirs. After Hamilton's ordeal, families came asking to mend fences, working in return for pasture rights. The poor sought work. Women gathered in Amara's sewing room to earn coin, and children filled the porch to hear her read while Zeke taught them to ride. Day by day, folks began to call it Carter Ranch, a home not of wealth, but of welcome, warm as a winter hearth. Amara watched it all with a heart that throbbed full. She remembered the beginning, when she had been nothing but a wager in Cole's game. Now she stood in the yard, skirt lifted by prairie wind, hearing children laugh, knowing she truly had a home. Zeke spoke little, but pride glowed in his eyes. Each evening he rode the fence line, then returned to find Amara on the porch, knitting for the little ones, her curls loose in the golden dusk. That picture, more than the grandest house, was his treasure. One afternoon, as the first snow fell soft, Zeke worked in his small shed. With knife and steady hand, he carved oak into words. Amara stepped in, curious, and read the letters forming. Where choice begins, love endures. She touched the grooves with her fingertips, whispering, "You truly believe this?" Zeke lifted his gray-blue eyes, a gentle fire burning there. "I do. We started from a choice neither of us wanted, but we chose again, for ourselves. That's why it lasts." Amara said nothing, only smiled, a smile that shook him to his core. Together they carried the sign outside, fixing it above the cabin door. The north wind tugged, the board creaked, but the Keith words held clear in the fading light. They stood on the porch side by side. Amara leaned against the post. Zeke folded his arms near her. Before them stretched fields blanketed white, horses grazing in the distance. Behind them rose the sound of neighbors' laughter, lively yet calm. Amara turned her head, meeting Zeke's gaze. He turned too. In that locked look, there were no walls, no distance, only two souls who had weathered trial and found each other. What began as a wager had become the start of a new legacy. And love, no longer secret, no longer doubted, stood firm, quiet, and enduring, right where once there had been scorn. The prairie wind still blew cold, winter still bit hard. But beneath that porch, Amara and Zeke knew they had chosen. And because of that, love would last. Friends, have you ever lived a moment when love itself became your anchor, no matter the storm? Share your memories below so we can honor them together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so these Wild West love stories can keep living on in all our hearts.